Okay, this video has to do with range of motion. We're doing range of motion of your elbow and range of motion of your wrist. And so I'm going to use Franklin again because I find him helpful. I like using Franklin to go over this stuff. But we're gonna go through. Let's see. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 ranges of motion that you need to get, that you need to have down. Okay, they're pretty straightforward. So let's tilt the camera down so we can see a little better here. So I got Franklin's wrist in my hand. You can see that Franklin is in anatomical position. In anatomical position, he is palm forward. So this is the palm of his hand. And the reason we do that is because we keep the bones parallel. If you're looking at the back of his hands, you can see that crosses the radius and the ulna. So that's why anatomical position works this way. So in anatomical position with Franklin, what we're going to see is a wrist flexion. That's going to be going up, isn't it? Anytime we have a flexion, that's simply we're taking this angle and we're going to reduce it. So from down here, it becomes a flexion. Now, from some of you, you know what this is like when you go too far. You can hyperflex this, can't you? And really hurt yourself. We can also do an extension. Extension is starting here and moving backwards. That's extending your wrist. And again, it's real simple to hyperextend a wrist, isn't it? And go too far. And we'll be taping and doing some other things to help you out on that. But flexion of the wrist, extension of the wrist. Okay, some other ones with the wrist itself is we have what's called the wrist radial deviation and the ulnar deviation. In my very first video going over the bony landmarks, I said this is the radius. The radius is on the thumb side. And I can't push that one enough. My daughter would yell that at you to say it's the thumb side. But anyway, the radius is on the thumb side. So if we're going to do a deviation, what that means is we're going to move the wrist that way. So a radial deviation is when we move our hands sideways. And ulnar deviation is when we go towards the ulna. And so you guys can do this too with yours. Radial deviation is going that way, and ulnar deviation is when we go towards the ulna. So it's the side-to-side movement. Radial and ulnar. Radial and ulnar. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. Okay, so those two you need to know as well, radial deviation and ulnar deviation. Okay, my next two have to do with anatomical position. Right now, he is in supination. In supination, the forearm bones are parallel. Okay, if I'd ask you to carry soup, you'd do it like this, wouldn't you? This is how we carry soup. This is how I remember this one. So the opposite of supination is pronation. And when we do pronation, and you can see the bones, what happens? That's when we turn it over and we crisscross the bones between the radius and the ulna. So this is pronated now. If you're in a pronated position, you're lying backwards from anatomical position. So supination and pronation. And again, how you would carry soup. That's how I had a student when I first years explain that to me. That's how he remembered it, was this is how he carries his soup. Okay, so that takes care of those two. The last two are really simple, and you guys know these already. Elbow, flexion, and extension. I'm going to turn Franklin so you can see just a little different here. When it comes to flexion, obviously it's when we make the elbow joint smaller. So we start off here, and to flex the elbow is to come up. To extend the elbow is to go down. That's an extension. So elbow flexion, elbow extension. Okay, so today in my less than 5-minute video, we have gone over, we said wrist flexion and wrist extension. We went over wrist radial deviation and ulnar deviation. It's kind of a rough ulnar deviation. We can't go that far. We said this is supination and this is pronation. And then we had elbow flexion and elbow extension. And that's it for our range of motions on the elbow. Now, something that we've gone over before, when it comes to the elbow particularly, and take this last minute and do this, you can have several ranges of motion. First of all, you can have an active range of motion. If it's active, I'm going to ask my patient to go ahead and flex their elbow. They'll come up and they do all the work. That's if it's active. If it's passive, I'm going to take the wrist and I'm going to support the upper arm here, the humerus, and I'm going to lift it. That's a passive range of motion. There's also a third one called active assist, and that's when I say I'm going to support and hang on, and I'm going to say, okay, go ahead and flex your elbow up, and I'm going with them, okay? But I'm also feeling that they're moving as well. So active, they do it by themselves. Franklin can't do that. Passive is when I do it for them, and active assist is when we do it together. So those are the 3 ways to do range of motions. Okay, that's it for this video.